The pads will come on this weekend, and physicality is going to make the truth be told. I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, I'm Tony Wiggins here with Locked On Jaguars, your host of the daily Locked On Jaguars podcast. We're at your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. Reminding you that we're free on all platforms. Make sure you like and subscribe on our YouTube page as well. You hear that sound? Not yet, but if you take a nice little listen, if you're in Jacksonville and you ride down Bay Street and then you go over the Hart Bridge, and then you head over to Episcopal High School, the annex where they're having practices, you're going to hear some popping. And it won't be popcorn. It'll be the sound of what we call the Tods in the world of Pop Warner, the pads. They will be coming on because the Jacksonville Jaguars will start hitting this weekend. There's a significance to that part of training camp. We're going to dive right into it today and tell you what it is and talk about why it's so important. Segment 2, what we'll do is let you know the good and the bad of putting those pads on, what you want to see and what you don't want to see. And then in segment 3, who won't be, guys like James Robinson, who won't be participating in that, and what position groups and who, there's a little small group of people that can actually benefit more from those pads coming on than others, and we'll discuss that. But first, this is the part of training camp where it gets real. I almost said something gets real because that's what those kids say. You know, it's the time where it gets real. But for me, reporting on training camp is cool because especially if fans aren't there. And when you report on training camp on stuff like Trevor Lawrence and his ball placement, which I did earlier this week, and you talk about who looks good, like one day Evan Ingram looked good, the next day didn't. When you mention how big Travon Walker and Josh Allen, all of those things we talked about this week. Sometimes you get blowback from fans, and I understand it, even though I think that they don't think we understand it. You get a little blowback saying, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We got to wait and see what happens when they put the pads on because that's when things get real. Well, it does matter if you're comparing non-padded practices to other non-padded practices. And I think that's the part that folks don't understand. And all you're trying to do as an objective person over at practice is just give the fans a glimpse of something they can't see because it's not visible to them online, or they're not allowed to because of the practice facility this year. So, in my opinion, there is some value in telling you whether or not a guy looks bigger and stronger, how a guy's moving with or without pads on. But we get rid of all of that when the actual pads do come on. Now, they're only going to have 4 padded practices before they head up to Canton to play the Raiders in the Hall of Fame game. Also, they're going up there to commemorate Big Bo being enshrined into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That is Tony Baselli. So there's a lot to look forward to this week, right? One of the main questions that's been asked of Doug Peterson, even Press Taylor, and I think they asked defensive coordinator Mike Caldwell this the other day. It was like, hey, that's a small amount of practices for you guys to get in before you actually have to go and play a game. And the answers you were given it was almost like we control the controllable type thing, but you're right. It is a small amount. It's probably not ideal that that's what they're doing before they're headed up for their first padded game, but it's also, I think it's a lesson that can be learned. There's something that can be learned from that. And what that is there's a lot of times you run into situations and things that aren't ideal and you have to deal with it. Like playing on a Thursday night after a late Sunday game. That's not something that you really want to do. Like being away from your family and having to go play on holidays. That's something that you don't want to do. Or having 3 straight road games and not having the comfort of your own home and not having the comfort of those extra walkthroughs that you might do when you're the home team as opposed to a visiting team. So I always try to look for the silver lining in everything, and the silver lining in this situation is this. good. Get used to things not being comfortable because you have to overcome and adapt. But the physical part of the game is what can't be duplicated. It's sort of it's the bigger thing that can't be duplicated. The smaller thing is inclement weather, dealing with fans on the road, how you travel, those type things. The refs, but you really cannot simulate. You cannot simulate, and that's a better word than duplicate. You cannot simulate physicality. Throwing against air is different than throwing against a guy who is trying to control real estate and will take a beeline for your receiver going across the middle. Totally different thing. And you cannot simulate it. You can't even simulate it from practicing against your own team versus live action in an actual game. You can't simulate the differences between a preseason game and a regular season game, and then a regular season game and a playoff game. And I'm mentioning playoffs because I'm just telling you that there are different levels to physicality. I want to talk about what it means for the Jaguars, what we hope to see and what we don't hope to see. And you already know where I'm going with what we don't hope to see. We're going to discuss that in segment 2 of Locked On Jaguars. And, this is where the truth is told. This is actually where the truth is told, and the lies can no longer hide when it comes to physicality. And there's going to be some truth telling come this weekend, and I'm going to be front and center. I'm not going to be a Saturday, but I will be there Sunday morning, and I'm going to do a podcast that night that I'll publish early in the morning for you on a Monday to tell you everything about what we saw this weekend in terms of the physicality. All right, segment 2, we're going to talk about more of what you want to see and what you don't want to see and what it'll actually tell you about your team. And we'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars after I tell you guys about BetOnline.net, which is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online source for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today, because BetOnline is where the game starts. And you guys start here with us every single day on the daily Locked On Jaguars podcast, hosted by me, Tony Wiggins. I have covered this for 13 years. And we thank you for making us your first listen here, reminding you that we are free on all platforms. What does it mean? What does it mean when the pads come on? Who gets happy? I wonder who gets happier, the coaches, the players? When we talk about the players, I'll get to them in a second. Coaches get happy because the coaches finally, you get a chance to see what you got. You get a chance. I told people this story a bunch of times, and I'll mention it because I was just reminded of the story when I was telling Mayweather Promotions CEO Leonard Ellaby about when I got kicked out of a boxing gym when I was little. I'm in there, so I'm gonna use this example. I just told him this week on Twitter too. I'm in there, I'm boxing, I'm training because I followed my friend Shannon and my friend Man and my friend Benji and my friend Ornell. I followed them to the gym, right? First couple of days, I stand over there and I don't do anything. I'm just, somebody tell you, man, you're going to be in here, you got to do something. I don't care if it's just workout. I don't care if it's just exercise. I don't care if it's just hitting the bag. And, I'm pretty clean, 13 years old. I'm pretty clean with it in the streets. So next day I bring me some clothes. I switch up. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing what everybody else is doing. And hanging out, thinking it looks easy. Begged. I didn't even remember the guy's name, but Leonard told me his name was Mr. McCann, who I think that's the guy that kicked me out of the gym eventually. But what happened was, after being in there for a few weeks, just having a thing to do, an outlet after school, sometimes you can't hide. Guys try to give you instruction. You just want to get in the ring. I want to go against him. I can beat him. He ain't doing nothing. Oh, yeah? Okay, come here. Here, put this on. Now, let me see what you got. I got dusted off for about a minute before I got so upset that I kicked the young man. And when I kicked him, I got a stern talking to. And I was so angry and my ego was so hurt because I realized that I wasn't as physical and wasn't as disciplined as I thought I was. I was told not to come back. If you come back, bring your mama or your dad or somebody, and you're going to do things the way we do it around here. I didn't go back because I was embarrassed. All right. Which made me understand and love the discipline of the sport of boxing. So what does it have to do with the Jaguars? I'm going to tell you what it has to do with the Jaguars. Anybody can run around, and I'm not saying anybody like somebody off the street, like when I went to that gym, but all of these guys look good running around. They were all college players, obviously had some success in college at another higher level of football than anybody. But relative to the other 90 guys, you have a guy who's the best guy out there, which I think is Trevor Lawrence, and Trevon Walker, of course, and Josh Allen and those guys. And then you're going to have a guy who is as good as he is and as good as he had to be to even get an opportunity to be on the NFL field. He is the 90th best player on that practice field. And then somebody's 89th, 88th. That's just the way that it works. How do you separate them when your eyeballs tell you, outside of a fourth-string quarterback who has a funny wind-up and a funny release, but when your eyeballs tell you that they all look muscular compared to me, they all look like, don't make the mistake that I made in that gym thinking that I could whoop that little boy and that boy beat my butt. So the thing is how do you separate them? And I know this is a sort of an elementary way of talking. Trust me, I'm not trying to explain this to football fans as if they don't know what I'm talking about. I'm assuming that somebody is sitting in the car with their wife and their kids, and I'm not saying that women don't know football, but I'm assuming that you're in the car with your wife and your kids, and you force them to listen to this podcast, and they don't know anything or could care less about the how-to and the idiosyncrasies of the National Football League. So I'm going to explain it to them in layman's terms. The only way you can truly separate the difference is when they put on the pads, which it's a gladiator sport, and the physicality of the sport causes people to make business decisions and do things that they don't necessarily want to do. That's what happens. Watch any boxing match, they all look tough. Guy gets hit in the stomach 10, 12 times, he don't look so tough no more. He quits sometimes. So that's the same thing that happens with football. And there's a separation. And there's also, you want to function and be able to run a certain play. Can you run that play when somebody's banging on you? That's the difference. We can run it all day in our mind, and we can run it all day when we're out here and there's no contact. But when the contact starts, who stands out? Who separates themselves? And who is able to get the job done even with that toughness and that adversity? That's one of the reasons that coaches yell a lot, because they try to manufacture this adversity that you can only see when the physical play starts and when all of the noise starts on Sunday. So, yeah, we've seen it in the past. I've been at Jaguar practices in the past, and I've been, even in high school, I've seen it. Even in basketball, I've seen it, where guys look good and it doesn't appear that there's too much separation in any way. And then all of a sudden, when things get real, or when, like, as the kids say, the young people say, when gets real, now all of a sudden you don't look so supernatural, do you? When that guy's pushing on you, watch the offensive line and the defensive line. Watch the trenches. They all look like gladiators. This is the one time in 365 days that I remind folks again that as tough as Brock Lesnar and Goldberg and The Rock and Suge Knight and all of these other figures that are in action movies and rap bouncers and CEO, all the tough guy stuff you read, they couldn't cut it in the NFL. So to the untrained eye, when you're watching it without pads, it gives you a feeling that, man, we're good. Okay, let's see how good you are. I remember I was standing at Jaguars practice. This might have been 6 or 7 years ago. I think this is when I was still doing radio. And me and one of my hosts, and was like, man, they look different. They look pretty good out here, right? And this is where I always took pause and caution. when I tried to eyeball the team outside of pads and even with pads on, outside of someone there who's going to give them some pushback. It's when Dante Fowler sent Brandon Albert into retirement. He was dominating him, going around him. This was Dante Fowler's second year because he missed his first season. And we're looking at each other like Dante Fowler's going to be Lawrence Taylor or Von Miller. About a week later, they had a joint practice with Tampa. And Tampa had a tackle by the name of DeMar Dotson. And that's the guy that lined up opposite Dante Fowler for the most part. In case you don't remember, DeMar Dotson was 6'9", 335 pounds. Dante Fowler could not get by DeMar Dotson. Brandon Albert was 6'7", 330. He looked imposing too, but he was a turnstile. But when it came to DeMar Dotson, Big Dot put one finger on Dante Fowler and almost just held him at bay the whole time, and he made it look easy. So this is when you kind of learn Dante better come up with a second move or he ain't going to live up to that number 3 overall pick. Dante never really came up with a second move and still doesn't have one, and he's kind of bouncing around the league now. This is when the physical, and it doesn't mean that he's not physical. He's incredibly physical. It ain't got nothing to do with how big and strong you are for the most part. It don't have much to do with how willing you are to do it. A lot of this stuff is technical. A lot of it is technical. It's about technique. It's about how and what can you do when there's resistance, and what can you do when physically somebody's in front of you and they're technically better. They might not even be a better athlete, because the Jaguars have that situation with Luke Fortner at center. He's a technician who's physical, but he's really smart and he's a real technical person. He ain't going to blow you away as the most physical guy in the world, but they're expecting him to get by on his professionalism and his smarts and his technique. So the thing is who can function when the pads come on? The first step is going to be to see who can function on our team. When they go from 90 down to 53, who's going to be able to function better? What can you do? What type of team do we have? This is what you're going to learn. Are we physical enough to line up in front of people, and do we have the mindset they're going to blow them off the ball, and we're going to run the ball when we want to and when we have to? Are we physically good enough defensively to stop the run, to create a mismatch? And if both of your units are good offensively and defensively here in Jacksonville, and you're struggling in practice, well, it's going to tell you one or two things. Either both are bad or both are really, really good. And what's happening is you have iron sharpening iron. Generally, if both of them are good, you're just going to have moments where somebody else makes a play, and then the next time you'll make a play, and the coach won't be that concerned. Then you have to go to, and that leads to the other thing. How does this translate from us with each other? And when we actually get on the field in the preseason and when we start the regular season, what type of team are we going to be? Are we going to whimper? Or are we going to punch everybody in the mouth and be a bully? That's where the physicality comes in. It changes everything. It changes everybody that looks good outside of pads. They don't look good in pads anymore. Wide receivers start thinking, I don't think I want to catch that. The nature, the total nature of football is a cumulative. I'm going to get this word right, and I'm not going to edit it, and y'all ain't going to say nothing to me on social media. Cumulative. The adding up of the physicality, it wears on you. You get hit today, you don't want to get hit the next play. You get hit in the first quarter, you don't want to get hit in the second quarter. You get hit in the second quarter, you get hit in the third quarter. And then it'll go from game to game. I got beat up last game now. How quickly can I recover? And am I worried about getting beat up the next game? And so on and so forth. So it really, really teaches you a lot about who your team is. It teaches you a lot about all of the things that you have to actually get done. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk in segment 3 about this. There's a couple of position groups that's going to benefit most. And there are a couple of guys in those position groups who will benefit. I'll tell you who they are in just a second. In the third segment on Locked On Jaguars. All right. Segment 3. We're talking about physicality. Who's going to benefit the most? What players Like I talked about the coaches and why they like it. What players like physicality? Guys that are undrafted, late round picks, guys that have something to prove. Those are the people that love physicality the most, because if you don't have an advantage now, so you come in and you're this guy that they're not paying a bunch of money. You come in and you're not really expected to make the team. The thing you don't want is to stay in this mode of everybody being in short, because I told you, everyone in shorts, there's no way to be distinct. There's no way to make yourself distinctive. There's no way for you to stand out, because pretty much everybody looks the same. And the guys that are going to get the advantage if you're in that situation was there's no room for you to make up when you're in shorts, because everyone looks good in shorts. So the only way you can start separating yourself is when the pads come on, because that's when people notice what you can and can't do more than anything else. So if you're a backup defensive back and you can be more physical with that wide receiver, that's when you want to show that. If you're on special teams and you want to be able to get through those blocks and show people that you can get to your spot and you can hold the fort on your end and be disciplined and force that runner to go somewhere else, that's when this is going to be the time for you. If you're that offensive lineman who can look as if he knows what he's supposed to be doing when you're doing it against air or when you're doing it against guys you can't really hit, if you really need to show your strength, Tyler Shatley probably made this team. By the way, Tyler Shatley is going to make this team for the next 38 years. I told that joke. Everybody, I'm going to tell you again. Every year, Tyler Shatley re-signs a 1 or 2 year deal. So, but he probably started that because, from what I've heard, he's like the strongest person in the weight room. Now, does he translate that to the field? Maybe. And maybe that's what they notice. Maybe what he leads with is his physicality. If you're a blocking tight end and you have only one way to make this team, you can't show that one way and you can't prove yourself in that one way in shorts when nobody's hitting. This is your chance to shine, baby. If you're a defensive lineman and you want to show that you can set the edge or you can hold down the middle and occupy blockers so that the linebackers can run and flow to the ball, pads are your time to shine. If you're a defensive back and the running backs breaks through the second level and you got to make a game-saving tackle, can you make that tackle in the open field if you're really, really good at tackling? There's a kid right now in Tampa named Antoine Winfield. Same. Too short, too small, big-time hitter, hits everything in sight. And guess what? He's made a place for himself in the league now because he can do that. That's the physicality that we're talking about. The physicality that shows he plays bigger than his size indicates that he should, and that his lack of size is not an issue. Those are the things that you want to see. A running back who doesn't look fast, James Robinson, doesn't look fast, doesn't, blow you away at the combine, goes undrafted, put him in pads and see what he can do. Oh, so he has this great vision and he makes the first guy miss and he's slippery, but we could only see that when they had the pads on and they were being physical. This is what you're looking for. And the guys that I just mentioned, undrafted free agents, guys that have something to prove, this is where you close the gap and actually make an impact that gives coaches a chance to evaluate you and make them believe that you are better than you are or appear to be when you're not in pads. I hope everybody understands that now. And that's why we get so giddy for it. I tell you, don't want to be in pads very much. They might need the work. I'll use a boxing analogy again. If you're knocking people out all the time, sometimes you go in your sparring sessions and you don't want to knock out a guy because you need the work. You actually, someday somebody might get in there and they might do to you what Buster Douglas did to Mike Tyson. You might take him into deep water because he can take a punch. You're going to have to show that you can fight when you get in deep water. So offensive linemen, they need to get greased up a little bit. They don't need to go into the season and not have, I'm talking about veterans now, the veteran offensive and defensive linemen that don't have anything to prove. They need these reps. They need these rounds, if you will. They're sparring because they need to make sure that they have that football stuff down. People talk about being in football shape. Well, the only way you get in football shape is to hit people. You can't do it on a treadmill. You can't do it in a weight room. You can't do it running up and down the field doing drills. The only way you get in football shape, which is a gladiator sport, is to go out and hit people and be hit. And you recover and come back and hit some more. So that's why it's so important for them to start getting it past. That's why the question kept coming up to this week, the one I mentioned in the first segment. That's why that question kept coming up this week about, are these going to be enough padded practices for you guys to actually go out and play a game? And like I said, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think the coaches think it's ideal. But one thing you won't hear them do is complain about things that they don't control, because that gives their players a reason. If the players hear it, they'll use it as an excuse. So as a leader, these guys aren't going to come out and admit, no, I really, really hate this. This puts us at a disadvantage. You don't even want that thought entering the mind of your players. What you want them to think is, we ain't worried about that. Let's go. This is what we're dealing with, and this is what we're dealing with. We got to play. So, yeah, it's not, when those questions were asked, they were great questions by the members of the media, but the answers you got, it's not necessarily disingenuous for them to answer the question the way that they were answering it, but it's really counterintuitive or counterproductive for them to actually be truthful. If what you think they should have said is the truth, then no, it's counterintuitive, because you're teaching your team to overcome and adapt, or adapt and overcome, and you can't get that message across when you make excuses. So therefore, I'll say it for them. Hell no, it ain't ideal to go out here and go play a full game with only 4 days of pads and guys getting greased up. No, it's not ideal, but it's what has to happen. But that's why it makes these reps and it makes these practices so important, because you got to get a lot done in a limited or smaller amount of time than you ideally want to. So you got to get the most out of this. Now, here's what you don't want to see, and I'll tell you this, and I always say this for last. This ain't saving the best for last. This is saving the worst for last. I already told you what you want to see. You want to see your team get greased up. You want your guys to show you. You want guys to separate. If you got two guys evenly, you want to see who plays better under physical conditions, so that you start to get a degree of separation. Now, the things you don't want to see, the I word. You don't want to see guys getting the I word that, I'll say it, injury. Guys getting banged up. You don't want to see guys laying on the field. You don't want the trainers to go to work. You never want to see it in any game, but you really don't want to see it in a game that you're not, while they're keeping score, the games don't count for anything. If a guy's going to get banged up, he's going to get banged up when the games count for something. And it's inevitable that you're going to have some injuries, but you don't want, once things start getting physical, guys are going to push hard. Now, so talking back to that wife and that kid that's in the car with you that doesn't know about football, like I said, shout out to all the female Jacksonville fans. I know you know about the game, but I'm talking as if you don't, or somebody doesn't. You say, well, can they kind of play physical? Can they kind of, just lay off each other? No, they can't. People tell you in football, and I learned this from when I was in high school, where I wasn't very good, but the easiest way to get hurt is to try not to get hurt. You better blast somebody if you get a chance. Because if you don't blast them, they're gonna blast you, and that's the better chance you have of getting hurt is actually playing less physical. You won't get hurt listening to the Locked On Jaguars podcast, because it's your team every day, and this is what we do. We want y'all to take care of each other as the Jaguars get more physical. Hopefully we'll have something good to report when I record after the first couple of days, and we'll have that out to you and tell you who starts to separate themselves. And now the information that we get is going to be a little bit cleaner, because now we're going to be able to see the degrees of separation, or as I say, that line of demarcation drawn between the guys who are really good physical and the guys who aren't very good physically. But we'll be back to you same time, same place on Monday. You guys take care of each other and have a great weekend, and we'll see you.